This video may sound crazy, but hear me out. Everyone has heard of Minecraft. From its big success in indie gaming to its superstar rise on YouTube. This is quite literally the biggest phenomenon in gaming, having the most sales of any game ever. Now there is no need for me to go in depth in the history of this game, as there are plenty of videos that can do it better than I can. What I'm here to focus on is a blatant lie that's been staring us in the face for a better part of a decade, and along with that, answer today's question. Is Minecraft a roguelike? Minecraft's main two genres are survival and sandbox, in which it pulls unique elements from both to create an experience like no other. Well, at least like no other upon its release. It has spawned countless clones over time, but that's besides the point. The way a Minecraft world plays out is fairly straightforward. You spawn into a world, create a base, power up the gear that you find through looting and mining, and go beat the Ender Dragon, along with the game's optional Wither Boss, with tons of mini tasks to complete along the way, in the form of achievements. You can choose to end your playthrough at any time, or you can continue to play for the rest of your life. It is an endlessly replayable game. This seems to fit the mold of a survival sandbox mix, with the survival aspect shown on the hunger and health mechanic, as well as the hostile mobs, and with the sandbox aspect revealing itself with its infinite generation and building block mechanics. But what if there is something different at play here? A third, almost subgenre that defines Minecraft to its core. The roguelike genre has been around for quite some time, having its roots dating back as far as 1980 with the release of the original Rogue, the blueprint of the modern roguelike. I mean, that is literally what the genre name means, roguelike. It's like 1980s Rogue. Yeah, real creative. The main reason Rogue was a hit success was because one of the many things adventure games didn't have back then was endless replayability. This was, in my research, the first randomly generated game ever, boasting that every time you played it, it would be a different experience. Now this was huge. The most replayability we got in games in the 80s was a log and a box. Yeah, riveting. This phenomenon launched a huge craze that wouldn't really be noticed until the 2010s rolled around, with the release of Spelunky in 2008, and the release of The Binding of Isaac in 2011, in which these two games sought to revitalize the genre, taking inspiration from games like Zelda and, well, you guessed it, Rogue. To define what a roguelike is, we have to examine what made Rogue, Rogue, and then apply it to the current state of the genre today, to see if we can somehow fit Minecraft in there. It would be extremely easy to just say, random generated, it's a roguelike, and move on. So I want to give myself a harder challenge. Minecraft has to have at least 5 things in common with Rogue, and at least 8 things in common with modern roguelikes today. Starting off here, what was Rogue? In short, Rogue was a procedurally generated dungeon crawling game, which saw players exploring dungeon after dungeon, progressing further and further down to collect a rare amulet and beat that run of the game. Players would collect weapons, armor, scrolls, potions, food, and magic to help them fend off the mobs below, and use a version of turn-based combat to allow players time to think about their actions. Rogue also utilized a mechanic known as permadeath, in which death was, well, permanent. If you died, you were sent back to the title screen and forced to try again from the start. But if you managed to actually complete a run, you were required to go back through every stage in the game to re-ascend to the surface and complete your victory. This small ascension quirk is seen present in games like Enter the Gungeon and Slay the Spire. Although it's mechanically different, it still kind of represents the same concept. The game was extremely simple, and in my time playing it, surprisingly enjoyable for how clunky and dated the controls feel. I definitely feel the influence radiating off this game. Now with that being said, it is far from perfect. The controls, they're a mess. There's no clear direction to go, and the turn-based combat is literally just holding into an enemy until one of you dies. There is definite room for improvement, which is where our next game comes in. For the next step, we have to examine what, if any, mechanics transferred over to modern roguelikes. For the sake of time, I'll be looking at my personal big 3 roguelikes: Spelunky Classic, The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, and Enter the Gungeon. I feel that these 3 games represent the genre the best, but some honorable mentions would be Hades, Slay the Spire, and Dead Cells. Okay, so first off, Spelunky. It came out in 2008, it was critically acclaimed, yada yada yada. Let's get to the point. Spelunky has this 2D platformer perspective and is often cited as one of the most difficult games of the genre. It has the rogue mechanic of permadeath, meaning one wrong step and your entire run is over. It also has a very similar plot to the original Rogue. You progress through these harder and harder levels until you finally reach the end, grab your trinket, and get the hell out of there. Aside from that, it also has plenty of weapons, armor, and other items that progressively power you up in preparation for your final battle. But how do you acquire such items? Well, this is a bit of a detour, but I'll keep it short. Many, if not all roguelikes, include a shop mechanic, where you can give your currency in exchange for upgrades. Sort of like McDonald's. This new feature was introduced in 1982 with the release of Hack, the spiritual successor to Rogue, and the first roguelike. So we can safely add this to our list of tropes, which now reads: procedurally generated dungeons, a shopping mechanic, permadeath, an unforgiving nature, upgrades and items in the form of magic, weaponry, armor, food, scrolls, and potions, all which are randomly generated, progressive difficulty, a concrete ending point, but still encouraging replayability. So, how many of these does Spelunky hit? Well, it has every single one of them. And that's not all. In addition, it helps spawn some other classic roguelike tropes, such as bonus areas to complete after beating a run, often leading to a secret boss. Secret areas home to tons of loot to help power you up. Scripted character interactions, such as stealing or hurting the shopkeeper, angering him. And of course, dogs. Spelunky not only hits every single note for the classic roguelike genre tropes, it also makes some of its own, which we see present in our next game, The Binding of Isaac. My personal favorite game of all time, The Binding of Isaac is my first thought when I hear roguelike. It's got the staple camera angle, pixelated graphics, and above all else, lots and lots of shit, which primarily is what this game is. The Binding of Isaac takes those core mechanics, plus Spelunky's, and once again, expands it even more. In The Binding of Isaac, we see procedurally generated dungeons, a shopping mechanic, permadeath, an unforgiving nature, upgrades and items in the form of magic, weaponry, armor, food, scrolls, and potions, all which are randomly generated, progressive difficulty, a concrete ending point, but still encouraging replayability. Bonus areas to complete after beating a run, often leading to a secret boss. Secret areas home to tons of loot to help power you up. Scripted character interactions, such as stealing or hurting the shopkeeper, angering him. In addition to that, we also see a big change in the form of multiple characters, with the franchise now boasting a total of 34 playable characters, giving even more reason to play it through again. The other new addition that it added that admittedly Spelunky didn't need was a built-in hard mode. We don't really see a hard mode on roguelikes that often. They're designed to progressively get harder, not so much have a toggle, but I feel like it was still important to mention. Oh yeah, and of course, it also has dogs. Next up, we have Enter the Gungeon, which kinda combines the best of Rogue, Spelunky, and Isaac into one concise, intense experience. Released in 2016, this game was immediately another staple in the genre. Now I'll save us both the time and tell you off the bat that Gungeon features all the things we already mentioned, including a built-in hard mode as well as many playable characters. And in addition to all of that, it goes even further with the characters than The Binding of Isaac does. While giving less in quantity, it delivers more in quality, with each character having a different background and a much different moveset. Gungeon's biggest pull is its insane arsenal, with over 200 weapons to choose from. It is probably your most down-to-earth roguelike experience. Oh, yeah, it also has dogs. So, now that we have our list of definitive roguelike tropes, let's put them all on the screen for you. These are, what I believe, to be 10 genre-defining terms. Let's now see how many of these can be applied to Minecraft. Starting off, procedurally generated world, tools, upgrades, etc. I looped these all into one category because they seek to accomplish the same thing. Make each run of the game as unique as possible. And, well, arguably, Minecraft does this better than most core roguelikes. Not only is your terrain and world procedurally generated as a whole, but your structures, ores, treasures, and mobs are too, usually making every world vastly different than the one before it. Because of it being a 3D space, you're often going to find more diversity to work with in Minecraft than you would in games like Isaac, where you're bound at some point come across some very samey builds and runs. A shopping mechanic. Believe it or not, yes, Minecraft also boasts a shopping mechanic in the form of villagers and piglins, allowing you to trade away emeralds and gold respectively for way better gear or items, which is precisely what is found in modern roguelikes like Spelunky or Isaac. Permadeath. Once again, yes. Much like Isaac or Gungeon, Minecraft features an optional hardcore mode where you're only allowed one life and then the game is over. While it is an optional feature, because games like Spelunky and Isaac both feature revival items that add extra lives to your run, I would say this also counts as the permadeath entry. Unforgiving nature. This one is hard to quantify. Whereas it usually refers to one-hit KOs or some other random BS that has become popularized by the roguelike genre, it really all depends on the run that you have, or in Minecraft's case, the world that you're in. But I would say just like modern roguelikes, at the worst of times, Minecraft is definitely unforgiving. Progressive difficulty. Little known fact about Minecraft. The further away you progress from your spawn, the higher the spawn rate is for hostile mobs, and the higher the chance to find a zombie or skeleton wearing a piece of armor. And while moving away from spawn may not be considered progressive difficulty to some, allow me to offer this. On your normal playthrough of the game, you'll build a base, mine for iron armor, make a diamond pickaxe, do some enchanting, and then progress to the infinitely harder dimension, the Nether. You are literally progressing to a harder point in the game, so yeah, there's your answer. A concrete ending point, but still encouraging replayability. Previous to the 1.9 combat update, I would have put this in the no category. The game didn't really do anything to encourage you to play after beating the Ender Dragon, the game's final boss. It was up to you to make the most out of your world. However, as of 1.9, Minecraft now has a post-game where you can teleport out to the outer room of the end and gather insanely strong gear, such as max enchanted diamond armor, weapons, and of course, the elytra. When I say encouraging replayability, an example in the roguelike genre will be how the Binding of Isaac lets you play the progressively different and more difficult bosses each run, along with giving you special unlocks in the future runs of your game to boost your power. Much like how the elytra makes exploring your overworld much more easy and enjoyable in Minecraft. Bonus areas to explore after completing a run, often leading to a secret boss. These two are kind of separate, but End Islands and the Wither. Need I say anything more? Secret areas home to tons of loot to help you boost your power. Well, this one again is pretty easy. You can explore mine shafts, villages, outposts, woodland mansions, underwater monuments, nether fortresses, bastions, end cities, and much, much more. An example of this in the roguelike genre would be the black markets in both Spelunky and Isaac. And finally, character interactions to fill the world. In very similar circumstance to Spelunky, Isaac, and Gungeon, angering the shopkeep, or in Minecraft's case the villager, will usually result in a tough battle where you will most likely die. In Minecraft's case, it's the Iron Golem. And if all of that still won't convince you of Minecraft being part of the roguelike genre, I have one final piece of evidence that will indisputably place this game among the other greats in this corner of gaming. That being, it has dogs.